The fire
When we had the
stuff.
fire drill.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, in the recent weeks, we've been experiencing a spate of fires. Last week, there were 2 that broke out in Lagos Island, and we are hearing reports that it was multi-million naira damage that was caused. And then, of course, we've also been hearing about home fires. We heard about the family a few months ago that we discussed. The mother left her children in a room with a candle, and the kids died when the room burned down after the candle was, I think, accidentally fell over or something like that. But this morning, we have to bring up the issue of fire safety because many of us do not know how to protect our families or our homes or even our businesses in the advent of a fire, even to prevent a situation of fire. So to discuss this in the studio with us, we have the owner of Oak Interlinks, there we go, Oak Interlinks Company, and he's an HSE expert. If you don't know what HSE stands for, that's Health, Safety, and Environment. He's been doing this for over 7 years, and we'll be talking about issues concerning fire safety. So please stay tuned to make sure you find out tips on how to keep your family, your home, and your business safe. Okay, let's introduce to you Olusheye Kolawole. Olusheye, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
All right, for me, I've always had an issue with Lagos Island. So we'll use that first as a case study and a launch pad. And we have fires in that side of Lagos almost on a yearly basis.
Especially Balogun Market.
Especially Balogun Market.
Okay.
And the traders will tell you they've lost millions and millions. If government even attempts to move them, we all know they won't go. But we've had buildings that have been built upon, extended. It's just a warren's nest. Are we basically sitting on a time box because it's going to happen again?
Yes, it will happen again because, interestingly, fire is not just doesn't just happen. Okay, it's cost. And the interesting thing is that for a fire to happen, you actually need 3 basic elements to come together, and that is your heat, fuel, and oxygen.
Okay.
And of course, if you look at the Lagos Island area, which you mentioned, you find out that, of course, there's oxygen everywhere. All right. There's fuel because a lot of the materials that we use, in building and the goods and all of those things. So you have fuel as well. So all you just need that is missing is heat.
Spark.
Okay, and heat can come from electric spark. It can come from, like one of your colleagues mentioned earlier on, from candle, lantern, anything really. So you find a situation whereby once the 3 elements combine in the right proportions, then you have fire. So the Lagos Island situation, and not just Lagos Island, but our homes, our offices, you have all the right elements for a fire to occur.
But these places like Lagos Island, which it's like that's if you want a picture on fires in Lagos, that's the picture you look at. Is there a reason why these places are more susceptible? Could it be overcrowding? Is it location? Does it have anything to do with? I think a few weeks ago we had a building behind us crash. I'm not sure if it was just if it was a demolition, if it crashed, it was a fire. Is there anything to do with the actual structure of the building, or overpopulation, or the location, perhaps?
Okay, I think I'll still go back to the heat, fuel, and oxygen. And, you know, it's more like we're just lucky that we don't have more fires, you know, happening everywhere. Because in all the places, in the offices, homes, and all of that, you have those elements present. So it's just a matter of those things being present, and then people not knowing, not having enough information on how to actually prevent, you know, fires. So you have a scenario whereby probably in the Lagos Island environment, there is more of those things, you know, coming together, and then so you have a high likelihood that there's going to be fire.
And when the fire does happen, it seems to take a toll of its own, and not being able to, like, you know, it seems like managing the fire becomes a problem. Yeah.
You know, interestingly, I've mentioned these three elements, so I'll keep going back to those three elements because they're fundamental. And you have a scenario whereby those things, if you understand those three elements, it helps you to actually prevent fires.
Okay.
And then it also helps you to arrest or to contain a fire if it does happen. Okay, but because of lack of information, lack of education and all of that, you have a scenario whereby we are not able to prevent the fires in the first place by keeping those elements apart. Okay, that means you have a situation whereby there's nothing you can do about oxygen really, because it's always around. But you can actually find a way to make sure that you don't bring up the heat aspect of it.
Okay.
Or you find a way that you don't expose the fuel to the heat.
Okay.
So you can keep them separated to some point.
All right. So that gives you an idea of how to prevent fires, and I'll give some instances as we go on. And then it also gives you an idea of how to actually contain the fire if it does happen. And that's where all our extinguishers and all of those things come in. I'll quickly mention here that the reason why water, for instance, can take care of some fires is because the water takes care of the heat element, isn't it?
But not all fires.
Not all fires, okay, because there are certain fires that the water will not be effective, and there are certain fires also that using water may even be dangerous to you, okay?
Okay. Now, we've spoken about the Lagos Island, using that as like a business situation, but for many of us, even in our homes, we're not cautious of the things we need to do, whether it has to do with gas, it has to do with oil, it even has to do with candles, something as basic as that. And when we had this conversation, it still came down to an issue of what government is doing. Because she would not have been using candle if there's electricity. That is something we cannot, at this point in time, for millions of Nigerians, we have to leave that aside. But in situations where people have to be exposed to elements of fire, how can they reduce it getting out of control? Because it was Fela who said that water has no enemy, but the moment fire starts, before you get it under control, it will take a toll. So in situations in our homes in Nigeria, homes that are not built with fire detectors, what can we put in place to ensure our safety at home?
Okay, let me say this, that fires hardly start big. You know, it's a small thing and then it grows. Okay, so that's one thing we must know about fires. The second thing we must know is that fires can actually spread really quickly.
Especially when they get oxygen.
Yeah, and then when there's fire. And you can imagine practically everything can burn, given the right conditions. Okay, so everything can actually... Exactly. Everything can actually serve as fuel. Okay? So the first thing you want to do is, can we prevent? Okay, so keep those elements apart, do good housekeeping, make sure that,
your gas is turned off.
Exactly, things like that.
Can I point out, when in the case of preventing, it's common practice in a lot of educated people's homes. You see gas by the cooker.
Okay.
Isn't that a bomb waiting to go off?
Isn't that the heat and the fuel?
Right next to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
But because they don't have space, sometimes it's not because you're being silly. Where else would you put it? Maybe you're in a flat or whatever.
Or you're upstairs.
Yeah, but just a quick mention. The new cylinders that are transparent, They actually have a mechanism that, wouldn't allow explosion. So that's a good option. Okay. So aside from the fact that you can actually see your, gas as it goes down and all that, it also has a safety element to it.
Oh, great.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's some form of solution. All right. So I was saying that, the first thing is to prevent. Okay. But if you're not able to prevent and then, a fire does start, a key element is your response time.
Okay.
What we may call detection. Okay, and for you to be able to quickly, so the time the time lag between the fire starting and you detecting is very critical. All right, and that's where we come up with all the elements of an emergency response.
Okay.
And so we can talk about you having detection devices like your smoke alarms and all of that. Okay, we can talk about...
Are smoke alarms readily available in Nigerian markets?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
They are.
I was thinking of that, and I'm thinking, but smoke alarms, how are they very accessible? Even if they're available, are they expensive? How many? The woman with the candle in her house, could she have afforded a smoke alarm, for example?
No, but maybe we can look at that for what she may be able. For instance, probably in the UK. It's a requirement
of any building.
Yes, for any building. So it's not so much about affording, because if we want to, where there's a will, they say there's a way. So if we really want to, we can actually have those things. And the interesting thing about some of these things, just an aside now, is that when we do the right things, it actually builds the economy. So imagine everybody having to get a smoke alarm. So it's like money is circulating. Some people are making money. We are safer. And, the economy grows. But that's an aside anyway. So, well, for the people that may not be able to afford a smoke alarm, so we say, okay, prevent, be informed, so that in case there is a fire, you can know what to do. And that's why probably in your organization, you do something like a fire drill.
Yes.
The essence of a fire drill is so that if there's a fire, we know exactly what to do. You don't want a scenario whereby there's a fire and then there's someone that doesn't know what to do and everybody's just running.
Start looking for your phone.
Exactly, and the fire is building and it's building. So the time that you should have quickly used to arrest the fire, all right, you've used it to run around, and then the thing has grown big, and then it becomes very difficult to handle.
Can you institute fire drills at home? Is it something, because if we've talked about the situation where the smoke alarm may not be available to everybody, looking at the alternative, as you said, in terms of the response time of a family or group of people living together, can we institute a fire drill at home where people know this is the point, this is how you get out, everybody should conjugate here, this is the person who's responsible for taking head call or roll call? So how do we put those things in play at home?
Exactly. When we call it a fire drill, it sounds very big. Okay, so it's just talking to each other, telling ourselves this is what we do in the case of a fire. All right, this is where you go, this is what we use. And that probably will take me to the point of, extinguishers and all of that. Okay. But yes, we can institute something like that, which says, what do we do in the case of a fire? And that's what you also have in some of these signs, that the fire service gives out, the red ones, that says, in the case of a fire, what do you do?
In case of fire, do not use elevator. Do they need to tell you that? But apparently, yes, they do.
Yeah, they do, because quite a number of people will feel, oh, that's probably faster, and then you just go right in there. Okay. And so, talking about the response time again, that's where probably the fire service also comes in. And then when you talk about, places like Lagos Island, when people usually, when people usually say that, oh, the fire service didn't come on time and all that, then the question you want to ask really is that, were they called on time?
On time.
Okay. Did we wait until the time when, the whole thing was already out of control, and then you call them? Because really, fire gets to a point that it becomes difficult even for the fire service to take care of it, and they only will be able to manage it. Okay.
And as you said, water, because you would imagine maybe a woman in a home with children, for example, in their minds, they say, well, water quenches fire. They've seen that in cartoons. And as you said, there's some fires that water doesn't help. Yeah. Now, how, because for me, I'm very concerned about people who can't afford these things that perhaps would help people like us, even in our company.
Okay.
So the woman that has, I guess it's common sense not to light a candle and lock your children in the room, fair enough. But then how do you educate people to know that, well, when there's a fire, perhaps the safest thing to do is not look for your your precious belongings and maybe leave your home? Or what do you think, would maybe make people understand, the basics of what to do when there's a fire? Okay. After, of course, applying the preventative measures that you've advised. Okay,
now we can, of course, there's a need for a lot of education and information, which government agencies should do. Organizations like yours also could, help out in that. But in order for us to understand fires well, the first key thing is, what we call the fire triangle. What I actually mentioned is called the fire triangle.
Okay.
Heat, fuel, oxygen.
Okay.
All right. Make sure you keep those things apart. All right. And also going further, in order to be able to take care of fires if they do occur, we also talk about what we call the classes of fire. We have A, B, C, D, and F. In some instances, they call it K. All right? And it has to do with the kind of fuel that is actually sustaining the fire.
Okay.
Okay, so depending on the kind of fuel would also help you to understand the kind of extinguishing agent that you can use. Okay. For instance, Class A fires are fires caused by, combustibles, wood, paper and all of that. And you have a lot of that, around. So those ones water can handle. But again, the key element is it must be detected on time, because once it goes beyond a certain, size, so to say, it becomes really difficult for you to take care of it.
We will be wrapping up in a bit, but let's say it's an individual and we can see the different classes of fire extinguishers there on the screen, because as you said, water doesn't handle everything. There's also foam. What other extinguishers are there?
There's also CO2, and there's also dry chemical powder. Those are the very common ones in the market are DCP, dry chemical powder, and CO2. The one that is most versatile, if you like, is the DCP. The foam is just like water. But it has some other additives that helps it to handle what we call liquid for fires.
Okay. Now let's say I'm an individual who, for some reason, I slept off. Maybe there's either a candle in the room or it's my neighbor. But the next thing I know is I have woken up. I smell smoke outside my room. What are the steps I need to take? What do I do? This is somebody...
Should I open the door?
Yeah, this is somebody right now who's not responsible for anybody else. This is just an individual. Because if you have to talk about a parent who's responsible for getting a